Hey guys, Bradley Jack Design here with another design breakdown. This time my Eddy Pineiro graphic after the Chicago Bears won on a 53-yard field goal kicked by this gentleman here, Eddy Pineiro. So I had a couple people request they wanted to see how this is broken down. It's a pretty simple design actually, from the root of it, not too many layers to mess around with, but we'll go ahead and turn everything off and hop right into it. So first, this starts off with the text. Now, the text is in many different smart objects, just because while I'm working, I save things as smart objects, so they are editable later. So I'm not being destructive, and I can change things as I wish. So first thing I did was I took the text money and just duplicated it, or just typed out money, 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 because it's Eddy Money, Eddy Dinero, rhymes with Pineiro. So what I did on this was I rasterized this. So this is actually rasterized. So this is being destructive. And what I did was I selected money. I went into the channels and selected these individual channels and moved them around. So if I move the red channel around and turn it on, you can see that it's red over here and white over here. So I did this to just distort how the text looked. So you can do that if you have something selected and go in the channels. You can move green. You know, if I move green, you can see the green is still there because the red and blue are adding green with additive color. And you can see that there's magenta around here. You know, you can just keep selecting red and blue. So you can really distort it and make some cool stuff. Like this looks kind of cool, but that's not what we want. So I'm going to go back to this. So what we have is I went ahead and did that. Just shifted it slightly. And I actually turned on a Hue and Saturation Layer to turn, what was that, cyan and red? Cyan and red, the Chicago Bears color. So under, you know, cyan, I changed the hue and darkened it up to be this blue. And then under the reds, I changed the hue to make it this orange color. So I did that. And then what I did was I took it into, you know, this is the actual composition of what I had. I added this texture I have. So I have this texture of halftone, a halftone texture I created. Let me open that up. So if I zoom in, it's just sort of like this halftone dot texture of concrete of a photo I took in New York City. So I went ahead and screened that on top of the money. And then I have a displacement map layer of this same texture. So I have displacement map. It's set to 2 and 2, so you can see it very subtly is just distorting the edges. And I wanted to do that as if it looked like it was printed on a rough piece of paper, because that's what we have in the graphic here itself. So we're back to the original graphic. So I've got the text here with the channels change on it, with the distortion on it, with the texture on it. And then what do we have this layer? Layer 2. What is this? Nothing? All right, that's nothing. I'm going to delete that. So then in front of the text, we have Eddy himself. So for this, I have Eddy clipped here. I have the back portion of Eddy clipped here at the bottom. So the natural shadows from the photo of Eddy and Pat O'Donnell here are showing that this is realistic. It's just a really realistic way to show that someone is in a scene using the actual shadows. So if you want to learn how I do that, go ahead and watch my video on how I clip out players. I illustrate in there what I do to use the natural shadows. But essentially, I mask out the original photo and just make it black and white with a gradient map layer and multiply it. So then I've got Eddy on top here, and I went ahead and used the blur gallery for a path blur. So I've got two paths. I got a path of his foot rotating down to kick the ball, and then I have one of Pat O'Donnell slamming the ball down so he can kick the ball. And then I went ahead and, as you can see here, masked that. I masked out the effects from the smart filters to only these areas. And it looks like I have a little bit of a displacement on there as well. So what I did was I took the same displacement I used before and displaced it on Eddy to, again, make it look like he's printed on some sort of rough piece of paper. That was the whole thing I was kind of going for with this composition. So So if I zoom in, you can see, he's really jagged here in most all of his areas. If I turn the displacement off, it looks like that. I'll hit Command Z so we can pop back to what we're looking at. So I added a hue and saturation layer, which you can barely tell what it does. You can see it dumbs down some of the color here. Let's see what it does. Reds, nothing. Yellows? Okay, so it desaturates the yellows. I was probably trying to match some color a little bit more in the initial composition. So then what I did was I threw the score at the bottom with the same displacement I've been using this whole time, probably at 1 and 1. Just the Bears logo, Broncos, 1614, pretty simple there. Then I turned that to a smart object so I could displace it. Then we've got a bunch of texture. And when I mean a bunch, I mean one. So I've got this sort of grain texture that I've got on top to add a little bit of texture to the composition. And then I've got some color lookups and paper texture. Here it is. All right. So I have this newsprint background that I put on top of it. So this really looks newsprinty. It's really sort of that warm, dullish color of newspaper. I went ahead and added on an additional paper texture that I inverted 3 times for some reason. But I adjusted the levels of all of this so you just see the texture of the blacks probably. Yes, blacks because it's set to multiply. And then I have a color lookup on top of everything of Kodak 2395 to blend everything together and brighten it all up. And that's the composition. So pretty simple. It's just a clipped out photo I found that I edited of Eddy Pineiro and Pat O'Donnell. Again, if you want to know how I edit photos, you can look at my video on how I edit photos in Lightroom before I throw them into Photoshop. Same thing would work in Camera Raw. The settings are all the same, so you can just do it in Camera Raw instead if you'd like. Not a big deal. Put them in the scene, just have a quick lockup of the score at the bottom, and then sort of a dynamic, sort of glitchy but not really, channels affected repetition of the name money. So, and then I threw some texture on top of it. So pretty simple design. I liked it. It was fun to make. I just wanted to make him a design after he kicked that field goal, so I thought it was pretty cool. So let me know if you guys have any suggestions for any breakdowns in the comments below. Go ahead and follow me on social media at Bradley Jack Design on Instagram and at Bradley Jack Design with no vowels in design on Twitter. Other than that, make sure to like and subscribe. Thanks.